Last time we looked at the four essentials of life, things that you would know, hey, that's life right there because I can see one of the four essentials. Today we're going to look at something that's completely, again, orthogonal to those four essentials. I call them the four preconditions, things that absolutely have to be there in order for life to function and to be alive. But they're not necessarily evidence that, ooh, there's life right there. For example, one of the four preconditions is matter. Certainly, if you see matter somewhere, you don't automatically assume that life is there. And yet, life could in no way exist, the way we understand it, without some form of matter, some atoms and molecules. In particular, one of the most important forms of matter is H2O, water. Without water, we do not know how life could ever exist. There's lots of sci-fi movies that talk about non-water-based life, but we would not be able to really understand how life would work without water. And all of life on Earth works with water. So it is a precondition of the life that we're talking about in this class. Energy, as we mentioned, is an essential. And I like to talk about usable energy being the essential and energy in general being a precondition. So energy from the sun is an energy that is a precondition, and then the usable forms of it, ATP or other forms, is what life uses as its essential hallmark. Finally, we have stability. Keeping things stable is one of life's goals, and without suitable stability on a planet, you wouldn't see life if things change too much. So we have matter, water, energy, and stability as the four preconditions of life. I would say that these preconditions being there are good requirements for life to begin. An analogy is having an Olympic pool is a good place for an Olympic swimming event to occur. But the pool could be there for years and years without ever having an Olympic swimming event happening with people swimming and timers and somebody to shoot off the gun for starting. So the Olympic pool is like the precondition for the Olympic swimming event. And having all the swimmers there and having it actually going on would be the evidence that an Olympic swimming event is occurring. And that would be more like the essentials of the Olympic swimming event. So hopefully you can understand what is an essential versus a precondition. The activity that we did last time about the electronic device might help you in this case too, because you could think of, well, what are the essentials that make an electronic device an electronic device, but what are also the preconditions that are required for an electronic device? So spend a little time now thinking of what are the preconditions that are required for an electric device to be there. And you can think of things like, well, the laws of physics need to be there, but think about just more of the nitty-gritty stuff that need to be there. We need to have, for example, a conducting material like metal, because without it, you couldn't have a device. Once you have that list of things in your mind, are any of them the same as what you thought of last time as the precondition of electronic device? And are any of them different? If you have this list of preconditions, would any of them be evidence of an electronic device if it was discovered on Mars? Okay, why or why not? Then you could do this all over again with the preconditions of life that we talked about, the four preconditions. If you discovered those on Mars, would you say, I've discovered life? Why or why not? And hopefully that will clarify the difference between essentials on one hand and preconditions on the other hand. Now, arsenic DNA was once announced in the news as something of a discovery. You'll find out as you learn more about DNA that DNA has phosphorus in its backbone. Every building block of DNA has one atom of phosphorus. Phosphorus on the periodic table is related to arsenic, which is a poison, but has very similar chemical properties to phosphorus. So in 2010, scientists claimed to have found DNA that incorporated arsenic instead of phosphorus. And unfortunately, it turned out not to be true because somebody pointed out later, arsenic would make DNA 10 to the 17th times less stable than normal DNA, which really wouldn't work. DNA has to be stable for an organism to be able to be alive. But it gave people the idea that maybe there's certain preconditions of life that have flexibility. So if we say, well, water is absolutely essential, could we have something different than water? Could we have water that instead of H2O, where H is hydrogen, could we have D2O, where the D stands for a form of hydrogen called deuterium? It's a little heavier than water. Could we make a whole life form like that? And what about stability? That's one of the preconditions. How much stability do we need to have? Could there be huge temperature variations for life to be there? And how huge could those be? So it's fun to think about those things as we learn biology because it helps us understand the limits of what life can handle. I think the four preconditions are a good place to sort of think back and recap on what you've learned so far about the whole of biology. And this will help us launch into the next phase of what we're learning. And if you're going a little bit deeper, you might want to look now at a few other leaves and branches inside of the BioBook. For example, the root flow of matter and energy is something that you should look at now. And the branch, what molecules and macromolecules are essential for all life, would give you a lot of insight into this issue of what are essentials and what are preconditions. Skim over the rest of the branches because we're going to go into them in more detail. But make sure you go back to the branch and do the Check My Learning test because that will give you a few assessment points to see how much you're learning so far.